Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar. Today we'll be speaking about some tips for debugging in the DITA-OT and an introduction to error handling in the DITA-OT. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Leora Betesh. I've been working in computer programming since 2001, and I've been with Suite Solutions for the last 2.5 years working on various DITA-OT customizations. For those of you not familiar with Suite Solutions, we are a full-service consulting company. We specialize in DITA supporting technologies and customizations, and we'll be happy to help you with anything you need. Here's a sample of our clients and partners. And let's begin. So we're here to talk about debugging. We are writing code for the DITA-OT to customize it, and something went wrong when we generated output. It could be because of the code we wrote, or it could be because of the source files that we provided. Okay, so I created here a sample error, and we're going to see how to figure out what the error is. Okay. So I want to start by showing you the DITA-OT that we'll be using. I took a fresh copy of the DITA-OT 1.5 and renamed it DITA-OT 1.5 webinar. And for the purposes of the presentation, we'll be using the samples that come with the DITA-OT. Okay, this is our project builds file here. Let's open it up in the XML editor. And here we're going to call the target that's called error. Okay, this has some error I've placed in. And let's see what happens when we generate output. Okay, so we see here the builds failed. And when we look below the builds failed, this error message is not so helpful. It doesn't really tell us the source of the problem, right? It says the following error occurred while executing this line, build.xml, but we don't really know what the problem is. If we look a little further up, we see here topic reference, href null. So we get the idea that there's something wrong with one of the topics. Okay, but we still don't know which one or what the problem is. Now I look a little bit further up, and we see that the changing the oil 1.xml is missing in the temp directory. The system cannot find the file specified. So it means there's some problem with this file, right? But we still don't know what the problem is. Okay? So the first tip that I wanted to suggest, which is almost obvious, but still the foundation of what we're going to do, is we want to look at the beginning of this log. And we see here this window is too small to show the whole log. So we're going to redirect the output to a text file. So I hope everyone can follow along here. I'm using the ant command to call build-webinar.xml and use the greater than sign to redirect the output to log.txt. Okay, now log.txt is going to be here together with my project build file. So let's open it up. Okay, now what we want to do is when we're looking at the DITA-OT log, we always want to look for the first instance of an error. Because if we look at the bottom of the file, whatever errors are being showed there, they might be resulting from other errors. So we always want to start from the very beginning of the file and look through it and find the first error. Okay, so here we go. just give a minute for the screen to refresh. Here we have an error changing the oil1.xml. Line 10, element type fake tag must be declared. So we have some sort of tag which is not approved by the DITA DTDs, and this is our problem. Okay, so first off, we're going to redirect the error to a log file. And similarly, if you're generating output using a CMS, so there's always going to be a DITA-OT log. You might have to ask the administrator to send it to you. You might have to go in and get it for you. But any application that is running the DITA-OT, be it a CMS or WebWorks or XMetal, is always going to be the DITA log. And any error messages are going to be found there. So this is the foundation of debugging. And we'll take it from here. Okay, as we mentioned, always look for the first error. Okay, now we found that. Let's go back for a minute. Okay, let's say this time we were successful in generating outputs. We go to our out directory, and here is our PDF, our hierarchy PDF, right? So as we look through the PDF, we notice there's some problem with the output. It doesn't look the way we wanted it to. I had modified the list items, and here I could see that they're not using the modification that I put in, right? So we want to figure out where in the code is the problem, right? So when I say which template am I in, which template in the XSL caused us to get to this problem and caused us to get to this line in the output, right? Similarly, you might know which template you're in, but you have a number of different options in a XSL choose statement, and you want to know which option which scenario did I land in, right? Or which attribute set am I in? Okay, so the first little tip I have is for those people using XMetal. XMetal creates default IDs for each element which contain the element name. Okay, so let's say I have a few FO blocks, one before the other. Now, there are a lot of elements which end up creating an FO block. So if I just look at the FO block, I'm not going to know which element this was in. But if I look at the ID, and this came from XMetal, then I'll see that this is a section, and this one below it is a P. So now I can go back to the section and change the attributes or the template there to make it come out the way I need it to. Okay, now let's say you're not using XMetal. One thing we can do to figure out which attribute set we're in is we can create a dummy attribute in the attribute set. So in this case, I've gone to the unordered list, the list item, the label, which the label, of course, is like the bullet point or whatever you've used to label the list item. And I've added in an attribute named test. Okay, so now in my topic.fo, I'm going to have an attribute name called test, and with this value, and this way I can map between my attribute sets and my output. So I'm not going to just do it here. I'm going to put this attribute in a number of different attribute sets to help me figure out which attribute set is mapping to the attributes in the output. Now you might get an error message in the DITA-OT, but that's just an error where it's trying to convert the topic.fo to PDF. And the PDF says, hey, what's test? I don't know what that is. But for the purposes of debugging, this won't be a problem. Okay. Now, another thing we might want to do is create a comment inside the template to tell us which template we're in. So XSL has an element called XSL comment. And whichever template I'm wondering which I'm in, for example, let's say I've overwritten the front matter code. So some of the code is coming from the default DITA-OT code, and some is coming from my customization directory. So I want to know which template it's coming from. Okay, so I've put in a comment. I'm in the create front matter template, and in my output, I'm going to have at the point where the front matter code is in the XSLFO, I'm going to have this comment. Okay, now taking this a little bit further, let's say I know where I am in the code, I know which template is creating my code, but I'm creating some variable and I don't know what the value of the variable is. Something is coming out funny and I can't figure out what it is. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to use either XSL message or XSL comment to output the value of the variable. And here you can use XSL value of select and your variable name. So just to go back for a minute, XSL message and XSL comment are similar in that they'll display the same information, but they'll display them in different places. XSL message will display in the DITA log. So here we have the log from the DITA-OT, and all the XSL messages will be here, right? For example, here we're in the target transform topic.fo. So within this target, I'm going to have my my XSL message output. Okay, and that's very convenient when I just want to quickly see what the value of my variable is. So it's very convenient to put it here in my log. Alternatively, if I want to use XSL comment, then that is going to output into the actual output file. So in our case, it's going to be in the topic.fo. Of course, if you're running a transform to HTML, so every HTML file that is being generated from these templates is going to have the XSL comment in it. In this case, we're looking at the topic.fo. So at the same place of the template, so just like we said above, if I put the comments in create front matter, so right before all my front matter, for example, on the topic.fo, okay, so right here, before I get to front matter, I'm going to have enter template create front matter. It's a very precise location in the topic.fo, and that helps me figure out how to map between the code and the output. Okay, now I'm going to show you an example of how to output the value of a variable. So just by way of example, we had a client that was using the TriSoft CMS, and they had a requirement that they wanted to take the unique TriSoft ID that TriSoft creates and use that as the name of their output file. So TriSoft, what it does is for each publication, it creates unique IDs, it auto-generates them at runtime, and it saves it in a special file, and that file calls another file, and from there you're able to extract this publication ID. So this was actually took us a number of steps to get to the publication ID. Like I said, we had to go to one folder up from the output, find a certain XML file. From there was a path to another XML file. From there, we had to actually extract the information that we needed. Okay, so when we wrote the code and sent it over to the client, they got back to us and they said it didn't work. So it was pretty hard to troubleshoot without us having access to their CMS. The only way we could do it is adding in these XSL comments for each variable, and they sent the log back to us, and we could look at the DITA log and figure out where the problem was. So just for the purposes of the presentation, I've placed in here an example of what we did for the clients. But in this case, what I did to simplify matters was instead of renaming the output file, I just placed it on the front cover of the publication. So we had a DITA-OT parameter, which gets the input folder. Input folder being the folder containing our input. In our case, that's the samples directory. And then the next thing we wanted to do is get the directory that's sitting above that. So we took the string of the input folder and removed everything but the last folder. And then the create front matter template, so we had a variable for parent folder, for the event data path, export path, map name path. We broke it up step by step so it would be easier to figure out where the problem was. And then we inserted this comment with the value of each variable, and it was easy to see what the problem was. In case you're wondering, the problem was had to do with getting the parent folder. So once we knew that the problem was with this, with getting the parent folder, then we fixed that and everything else went smoothly. And just to show you how it turned out in the end, this is the ID that we needed to get. Another thing that's helpful when we're debugging is to speed up the debugging time. A lot of time you're troubleshooting a particular document, and for whatever reason it's a large document that you can't cut down. You really have to generate the entire large document. So you want to find some other way to cut down on the time it takes to generate. Right? A lot of times you're working through many iterations. You make a little change in the code, then you want to go back and see how the output came out. Then again, you make a change in a different file, you want to see how the output came out. And you're doing this over and over again. It's very frustrating to sit there, 5 minutes just waiting every time the output is generating. So one thing you could do is go to the root template. The root template is located in root processing.xsl, and comment out the parts that we don't need. So, for example, let's say there's a problem with the table of contents. You've isolated the problem. The table of contents is not formatting properly. So what do we need to run the bookmarks and front matter and all the body for? We really don't need that. We really just need to generate the create table of contents, the create talk, and everything else we can comment out. Right, the apply templates here. This is the XSL call that's going to generate the whole body of the document. Okay. As a side note, you can't comment out the create layout masters. Create layout masters is needed in order to have a correct XSLFO output. Another thing that we at Suite Solutions do is we use what we call the debugging target. And this is something that Arya Sanders at Suite Solutions wrote to speed the output generation. This is really just used for debugging, not for production, of course. Just by way of explanation, I'll show you the temp directory. Okay. Every time the DITA-OT runs, it takes all the files that it's going to need for the process and places them in the temp directory. And also, it combines all the DITA files into one merged XML file. In the case of the PDF transform, it's going to go through all the DITA files and merge them into one merged file. And there's also the intermediary files in between the XML and the PDF. They're intermediary files, as well as all the graphics that you're going to need. And the linking information, all that is stored in the temp directory. So what happens is every time you run the DITA-OT, this temp folder is emptied out and refreshed again. Or if you're in a newer version, if you're using the DITA-OT 1.5, so a new temp directory is created each time you run the DITA-OT. Okay? Now that takes a lot of time, and let's say your content hasn't changed. Right now we're troubleshooting our XSL, we're changing the code, but the content is static. So why do I need to refresh the temp directory every time I'm generating output? So we use what we call the debugging target. This target you place into the DITA-OT build.xml, and it's just like the PDF2 target, except it bypasses the step of the temp folder. And then this target you can place into your project build file and just reference the develop PDF2 target. And I put the code into the presentation so you can go back and put it into your own code. And just one more thing to point out, if you're using DITA-OT 1.5, which by now most people are, then you're going to have to temporarily remove the code that creates a new temp directory each time you run. So instead of having a temp directory that's named with the date and timestamp, just have a temp directory that's named temp, and that's it. Okay, and then this is located in built-init.xml, and if you want, you can go back afterwards and change it back. Okay, so like we mentioned before, when we're using the PDF2 transform, all the DITA topics are merged into one XML file. So even though we worked on splitting all our files into nice, neat, small DITA topics, but in order to get them into a PDF, they have to be merged into one XML file. Let's just take a look at this XML file. So we're in the temp directory. It's going to be named the name of your DITA map _ merged.xml. Okay, so in here we have all of your topics. Here's our concept and our title, related links. All of our content that we've set up is going to be in here. All our references to images, and of course which file it originated from. Okay. Now, why are we interested in looking at the merged.xml file? So I'll give a few examples. One example is, this is a very easy way to see the hierarchy and the class names. Okay, so just to explain, the XSL files right, let's say we're in our Demo.fo plugin and we're looking at our XSL files. Okay, so all these files, they're not running on the DITA topics, they're running on the merge.xml file. Right, by the time that we're calling these XSL files, all the DITA topics are already sitting in the XML, in the merged XML file. So if I'm looking at some sort of XSL code or XPath, then, and I want to figure out what the statement should be, then this is where I want to look to see what the hierarchy is, who's a sibling of whom, what the classes are. This is where I want to look. This is where I want to reference to know how to set up my XSL. Okay. Also, I want to see what topic merge is brought into the merged XML file. So, just as an example, on my DITA map, I set an output class on a topic. I'm wondering which element is it going to come out in my output. Is it going to come out on the actual body or on the topic element? Which element is it going to come out in? How did all my DITA topics fit in together? So the merge.xml is a way for me to see that. It's the output of the topic merge. And a third example is when I'm setting up specializations. So, for example, here we're using the learning assessment specialization, and you know, I'm using these new classes that I'm not necessarily familiar with. What happens is that the DITA-OT, let's go back to the merged file. During the topic merge, the DITA-OT adds on the class name to each element. So when we were in the DITA topics, let's just open up the DITA topic. Okay, so here I have a concept element, a title, a column body, but I don't have the full class value. So if I want to see that, the best way is to go to hierarchy merge.xml, and here I have my full class, topic body, concept con body. It's very easy to see what I should be matching against. Okay, and finally, this might seem obvious, but it's really important to note is that it's very easy to fix the problem using the topic.fo rather than trying to go from the code. So kind of like reverse engineering. In most cases, if I can fix the problem in the topic.fo, then I'll be able to go back to the XSL code and figure out where I need to fix the code. Okay, so for example, let's say I had a problem with my page masters. My first header never appeared, or I did not want the first page to be necessarily on an odd page. I wanted to also to be an even page. So I know that I should be changing the layout masters, but I'm not really sure what element. So an easy way to figure this out is I go to my topic.fo, open it in my XML editor, and then I also open the topic.fo simultaneously with XSL Formatter. Okay, now those of you who are not using Antenna House, you could still download a free trial of XSL Formatter. And of course, for production purposes, that won't help you, but for debugging, it's very helpful. What I could do is I can make a change here in my topic.fo. Let's say, for example, in my layout masters, I wanted to change something instead of odd or even equals odd. Let's take this out, and let's see what happens. And then I can go here to the XSL formatter and refresh and see how my change took effect. Okay, so that's like the bread and butter of debugging. And now I'll give a brief introduction to error handling. The DITA-OT is already set up with a fair amount of error handling, and most of the error handling we would need is already there for us. There are only a few cases where you might want to add in your own. It's still good to be familiar with that. The difference between error handling and debugging, some people think they're the same thing, but they're actually intended for a different audience. Debugging is for us, where the developers were writing the code for our program, and somehow we're getting an error. We want to figure out what error we have in our code or in our input. So debugging is really for ourselves. Now, error handling is when we want to communicate to the user what error they've come up with when they're running the program. So let's say they've put in invalid inputs or incorrect parameters, whatever the case may be. We want to give them a useful message so that they'll be able to correct their input. Okay, so one of the features of the DITA-OT is that the DITA-OT validates all our DITA topics against the DTDs. It does all this work for us, and it will look into the DTDs and see which element may contain which other elements, what the order is, all the rules. And if we haven't followed the rules, it will send us a very specific error message. In this file, on this line, you've used this element, but it does not have its required children elements, so please correct it. Right? This handles most of the error handling that we're going to need to do. What other type of errors might we want to handle? So I just put in here a few examples. Let's just say that, for argument's sake, we want to have a rule that two topics cannot appear twice in the same DITA map. Okay, so I'm using the DTDs, but I want to add a further constraint that, in addition to what the DTDs are constraining, I have my own rules. Or, for example, no two topics can have the same nav title. So there are different options with error handling. You can send a warning message and continue with the output generation. It could be some error which is minor, but you still want to give the user a message, so you could send a warning message. Or if there's an error that's more major, then you can actually force the build to fail. And in some cases, you might want to differentiate between draft mode and real production mode. So in draft mode, let's say you're going to allow the error to come through and just tell the user where the error is. And in real mode, you're not going to let the error come through. With that type of error, the build is going to fail. This is just an example of different things you can do. You can set up conditionalizing for whatever scenarios you need. Okay, so the DITA-OT is already set up with messages set up in an XML file. And here in this example, I've created my own messages. Okay, so for my scenario, I need these two messages. This one, the first one is going to be fatal. The second one is going to be a warning. So where do I put these messages? How do I integrate them with the DITA-OT? So in the DITA-OT, go to the resource folder, and here I have messages.xml, messages template. Open those up. I also have the messages DTD, which this decides what can be inside the messages. Okay, so this is the messages.xml, the DITA-OT. All the error message that you're going to see coming out of the DITA-OT are right here. And messages template.xml includes the DITA extension where I can plug in my own messages. Okay, so let's go to the bottom of this file. I have here my plugin point. Right? So I have here an insert action, which means that at this point, whatever I plug in will be inserted here. And this is the ID for me to use in my plugin. So when I said I'm going to set up a plugin, I'm going to reference this ID and call my messages.xml. And all my messages will be inserted here at the same place at the bottom of the file. Okay, so right here will be all my messages. And then, let me open up another example. Okay, so let's say I've taken my topic merge.xml and I have different scenarios here. Now I got to this scenario, this error, and I'm going to call the template output message, give it the message number, and at this point the DITA-OT will create an error message for that scenario. Plugin. And that's the end of our discussion about debugging and error handling. Please feel free to be in touch with me. I'd be happy to be in touch with you over email or over Skype. If you have any further questions, anything we can help you with, please by all means. Thank you very much.